Hey, everybody. Welcome to Heart of the Matter. I am your host, Elizabeth Vargas. It's great to have you with us in the dog days of August. And we just had the closing ceremonies to the Olympics a few days ago. And our guest today actually could have been an Olympian had his sport been in the Olympics before 2016, skateboarding. Skateboarding, this is only the second time that we've had Olympic skateboarding competition. It was really actually great to watch them. 13-year-old won the gold medal. It was really exciting to see that. But Brandon Novak, our guest today, was a skateboarding prodigy. No doubt about it. By the age of 14, he was one of the most famous skateboarders in the world. By the age of 23, he was a multimillionaire and a household name thanks to his regular appearances on an MTV television show called Viva La Bam. He also starred in several movies, the Jackass movies. Sorry, Mom, that's the name of the movie. But they were huge hits, not just in this country, but worldwide. People knew him worldwide. But what they might not have known about him is that he had an enormous, by his own definition, drug and alcohol problem. His early earned wealth really led him to, as he put it, loiter with the intent to recover. When he tried to get sober, not surprisingly, he says he didn't. He was in and out of 13 rehabs, countless detoxes, and he went from being this world-famous prodigy skateboarder, multimillionaire several times over, household name, recognizable to teenagers and young adults, especially young men everywhere. He lost it all, except for the love and support of his mother. His is an incredible journey of triumph and fame and riches, followed by incomprehensible loss and defeat, and then finally redemption. Brandon Novak has a lot to say about why kids fall down this rabbit hole of substance use disorder. We know that kids who start using drugs or alcohol before the age of 18 are much, much, much more likely to develop a problem with that. We also know that kids who compete in high-impact, risky sports are often also vulnerable to using substances in an unhealthy way because they're used to taking risks on the sporting field and on the court, and that spills over into their personal life. Brandon Novak has quite a story, and I think you'll enjoy hearing from him today. I'm really happy to welcome Brandon Novak. Brandon Novak, welcome to Heart of the Matter. It is great to have you. And I was reading on your own website, on your own webpage, you call yourself, quote, the guy no one ever thought could get sober. Why did you say that? And why is that true?
Boy, I said it because I believed it, for so many years, 22 to be exact. And countless attempts at recovery, sobriety. I would enter into these programs, these facilities, these 12-step establishments, and I would see other people getting it. And I wanted so badly what they had. I really wanted those results. But unfortunately, I wasn't willing to do the work that was required to get said results. And I remember for like 12 to 15 years, a reoccurring dream that I would have at night was when I was in one of my first treatment centers. Somehow there was a celebration. A client was celebrating 1 year of continuous sobriety, and his mother was sitting in the front row, and she got up and she gave him a hug and she kind of said some words. And I remember thinking to myself how badly I wanted that, but unfortunately, it's just not obtainable for a fellow like me, and as time progressed and my disease followed, it wasn't looking any better. Right? Yeah. It wasn't like I continued to use and I'm like, oh, maybe I can achieve that one day. No, things got worse. They got darker. And I became suicidal, homicidal. People attempted countless times to intervene, subject, and interject and help, and I just got worse.
What do you think that was? I mean, you use the phrase at one point, loiter with the intent to recover, when you describe how you went through rehab. You're loitering around, intending to recover, but as you just said, not doing any of the work. And after 13 stints, as you said, you started off in the 5-class, rehab centers, and it slowly degenerated. Your mom was desperate. Your brother was desperate. Everybody in your family was desperate. People around you were desperate. When I read about your story and listen to you talk about your story, you're one of those people where I'm sure you've had people say, "Thank God you're alive. I can't believe you survived."
Yeah, in retrospect, what I've learned today, with a gentleman who has just celebrated 6 years of continuous sobriety, what I've learned is that my life is lived forward and learned backwards, right? Like, and that paired with the fact that I'm too smart for my own good, and I would continuously think myself out of any sensible decision that I was about to make that was going to have a positive impact on my life. It got to the point where my mother, in the beginning of my addiction, used to pray to God in the middle of the night not to receive that phone call that her son had passed, to at the end praying to God to receive that phone call that I had passed, just so she could finally have a peace of mind.
Oh.
That's kind of where it took me, and I couldn't understand how I had gotten there, because
Right.
that wasn't my intentions. I came from better. I knew better. As a matter of fact, I live with that cautionary tale, that after school special, if you will. My father died as a direct result of the disease of addiction. So from a very young age, I could recognize the psychic change that takes place in an individual upon, them ingesting a drink or a drug. Because my father was a great guy. Everybody loved Rome. But when Rome didn't come home to make dinner at 5:30, and we heard his keys hit the lock around 3:30, we shook like leaves, because we knew what we were in for.
And why do you think witnessing that and experiencing that with your dad didn't keep you from walking that same path?
Well, now it's very, very clear for me to see, is that the sad reality is I really underestimated the opponent that I was up against, meaning addiction. I underestimated the severity and the reality of my situation time after time, because I had done some things in life at a very young age, and still continued to do so throughout active addiction, that people would equate to success, happiness, potentially even dream of doing, which furthermore allowed me to continue to possess this job that consisted of knowing everything. Right. So when I put my hand up and I say that my name is Brandon, I'm an alcoholic, all that means is that I'm defiant by nature. I hate authority, and I will never conform unless it becomes my idea, because I possess that job that consists of knowing everything. And then walking into treatment center number 13, I had a lot of realizations. I was divinely inconvenienced in just such a manner that created just a big enough gap between me and the last time that I got high, to have that moment of clarity, to see what my life had really become, and who had made it that way, which was me. And I went from possessing that job that consisted of knowing everything to coming to the realization that, what I do know is that I don't know. Right. Ultimately, I dumbed my way into this. I did process of elimination, but backwards.
You refer to the success you had in life. That's that's an understatement. You were a child prodigy at skateboarding. At the age of 14, you were the first skateboarder ever to be endorsed by Gatorade. You were a superstar in that world, doing television commercials with Michael Jordan. How and when in that time period and in that process did you pick up drugs and alcohol?
It was I sit here and I stand by my belief, and I believe that I was one of those few that was genetically predisposed. That's where I believe my disease came from. My father was an addict. His father was an addict. My mother is not. My brothers and sisters who are from a different man are not. I am the only one that fell victim of this. And, I often say the reality of the disease of addiction is that it doesn't discriminate, right? Like from Yale or jail, the White House or the outhouse, the results are all the same. 1 out of 3 people are affected directly or indirectly. So my story is my story. I can't tell you your story, their story,
Right.
And what my story looks like is I don't remember. I do not remember the first time that I drank that beer, I sniffed that line, I hit that pipe, I ate that pill. I remember the first time I shot heroin, but the rest of it, I don't remember, because it wasn't like I had that aha moment. As soon as I did it, I got like this yearning of like, I have now found the reason for which I will jump out of bed every morning with the lust of life. That I don't even remember it. Right?
But
Like,
you did go to rehab for the first time when you were 17 years old. So
correct.
clearly it went downhill fast.
Well, if you would have asked me then, absolutely not. This was merely an overreaction at best. You
Right.
just caught me at a bad time on a bad way in a bad day. Tomorrow will be different. So treatment center number 1 was simply to please the masses, to allow my mother and my girlfriend to see that I can drink and drug successfully without repercussions. And I went in there with a closed mind and a closed heart, comparing out, proving a point why I didn't belong, focusing solely on the differences, never the similarities.
You were kicked off the skateboarding team, the Tony Hawk skateboarding team, because they caught you with drugs. How old were
Yeah,
you when that happened?
I was given the option.
Oh,
And
you were
that's
given the
what's,
option. You can stay on the team if you go get help or stop, right?
yeah. And this is at 16. So at 16, the disconnection from reality and or abnormality had already taken place, and I was so far gone and just so ill-equipped to see how bad of a position I was. You know what I mean? Like, looking back now, it's insanity to me. But at 16, the abnormal has already become the normal. I'm given this ultimatum: you can go to treatment, you can save your life, continue to ride for Pal Peralta, or quit the team. From 7 to 14, the moment I received that first skateboard, to given this ultimatum, I ate it, I breathed it, I slept it, I dreamt it. I had became everything that I wanted at a young age. And like that, I'm given this ultimatum: you go to treatment, save your life, continue to skate for POW, or quit the team. And I don't have a breath of fresh air in my lungs when I quit, and already at that point, it's like it had its grips in me. It had its grips in me. And I had lost the privilege to have a say-so in the matter, but I had no idea at that point.
You went on after that to continue, despite it all,
Oh,
to
yeah.
continue to have incredible success and fame. You went on to star in an MTV show. You were in several blockbuster movies. You were on Viva La Bam and the show Jackass, which I've got to tell you, my 2 sons spent years watching.
I apologize.
Yeah. Okay. I accept your apology. Trust me. I was mortified. You were a millionaire 3 times over by the time you were 23 years old. So while your mother and Tony Hawk might have been saying, dude, you got to clean up, you got to stop doing this, the rest of life seemed to be telling you, hey, you're good. You're good. Just keep going.
Yeah. From a very young age, my mother used to tell me, show me who you walk with and I'll tell you who you are. And that transcended into what I believed, keywords, what I believed I heard one of my many therapists tell me at one of my many attempts at treatment, which was social acceptability equals personal recovery. Right. And now that could never be any further from the truth. It has, that is not the case at all. But I believe that. So as long as like the home was big enough, the car was new enough, the account was high enough, the woman was pretty enough, and you told me that, or complimented me on those things, then I had to be doing well. But the reality was I couldn't keep a needle out of my arm to save my life.
How often were you doing drugs during that whole time
Oh,
period when you were an enormous, huge star?
as much as I possibly could.
Daily?
It still dictated and kind of controlled my life in certain aspects, and more so than not. You know, it was very rare that work came before that. And even if work did come before it, there still had to be a way where I could be under the influence just enough to make it through work to indulge like I'd really like to.
I read someplace that in your green room rider, which is a contract that you have with venues when you appear there, like, here's what I like in my green room. We've heard all sorts of funny stories about celebrities wanting a certain color M&M or a certain kind of bottled water, you know, that kind of thing. I heard that in your green room rider, you explicitly stated you need booze and drugs in there. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Wait,
Absolutely.
I mean, what establishment provided? That's illegal for an establishment.
Well, these are like, you know, I'm doing appearances in nightclubs, you know, so it's kind of already that world of bars, nightclubs, deal ish, you know, and again, that kind of continued to allow me to believe that I knew what was going on, because I would attempt to get sober. I would go to these meetings, I would go to these treatment centers, and they would tell me that my life was unmanageable. I agreed that my life was unmanageable. But then I would receive a check for $10,000 for doing this appearance, and my bank account seems pretty manageable. You know, paired with the fact that I have this delusional alcoholic brain that lies to me in my own voice that makes me believe the unbelievable. Paired with the fact that I've been diagnosed with a disease that I have gladly accepted the diagnosis of, but that disease tells me that I don't have this disease. Right? It's like, it's the layers of this, the complexity of addiction and alcoholism is just, it's beyond me. And it's truly solely for me, and I'm married to my narrative because it's the only one that worked for me. I understand it's not a black and white, one size fits all. So I have to, this is my story, but it's only through the grace of my God that I have been delivered from that life, because no human power, and believe me, I've tried, I've moved to Finland, I moved to Paris, I moved to London, all over the United States. I've changed women's homes, careers, in hopes to lift me of the obsession and rid me of the desire to want to drink or drug. And it just didn't work. And it was only through, for me, experiencing the 12 steps that allowed me to have that spiritual experience that led to a psychic change, which ultimately believes I today, Brandon Novak, no longer think like I thought when I walked into treatment center number 13, May 25th, 2015. So that's what I accredit my success to, if you will, and I don't like that word.
During that time when you weren't suffering the consequences of being of being broke, of being homeless yet, because you got there.
Oh yeah,
but during all those years when, you know, you still got work, you're being flown around the world to do stuff, you're appearing in nightclubs, you're appearing in blockbuster movies, you're appearing on a TV show. What's your mom telling you? What are your colleagues telling you? Because certainly they're noticing that you're under the influence almost all the time.
Well, see, in this Viva La Bam jackass world, it's the role that I played was really an alcoholic's dream to a T, because the more outrageous my behaviors are, the more outlandish my antics become, the higher the ratings, the more in demand, the more money I make, which ultimately goes right back to the drink or the drug. So it's just
incentivized. It
literally is, you know, and it's not even my role that I have to play. It's not even a character, because it's me, you know, it's me. It's me. So there really was a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde on top of the already Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, which is the alcoholism or addiction.
Did it ever get so bad, though, that the guys at Jackass or at MTV said, hey, you can't do this?
Absolutely. Yeah. You
know,
enough. With the Jackass stuff, the paychecks started being diverted to my second ex-fiance, because it got to a point in my life, in my career, I was the kind of alcoholic that I really lost the privilege to have the say-so of what I would or would not do, or when I would or would not do something in order to acquire another drink or a drug. And unfortunately, sadly, anything that stood between me and it would go. And it wasn't personal, it was just business. So when I say second ex-fiance, because clearly there was one before that also attempted to. So a lot of things had to go. And so paychecks would be diverted. Flights were no longer being booked. Videos weren't, parts weren't being produced, because simple things like that require me to have conversations that consist of words like honest, reliable, and dependable. And those three words will never help me get one more drink or drug. So I avoid that like the plague.
I was struck. I mean, obviously, I've been very public about my battles with alcoholism. And I wrote a book myself talking about how I managed to keep that a secret. I was very highly functioning, though. I mean, I had to show up to work every day. I was on live television.
Sure.
I had to keep my drinking separate from that, something I did once I got home. And at the end, I finally had to get help because I was starting to fail in keeping that separate. I knew it was going to, in other words, you were in an industry that I think if there's a television or entertainment or sports industry that puts up with, drunken behavior or even behavior where you're under the influence of drugs, you were in it and you were very successful at it. You were very good at it. But even after a certain point, that ran out.
As it always kind of does. Looking back, thinking about it now, that the first Jackass was sponsored by Miller High Life. So I remember we were filming that, they'd have to rent like literally an extra hotel room to store all the cases of beer. That's how, you know what I mean? Obviously times changed, it became unionized and that's no longer acceptable. But in the beginning, like that's how it was. But as all good things come to an end, that happened, because the reality was I go to these meetings and I hear people say, this thing like my worst day sober is better than my best day loaded. And I'm like, I feel really bad for you, because I personally have had some of the best times of my life getting loaded. Like I did, that's the truth. But the reality of my story is that the party ended. It turned into a full-time job that paid nothing but pain and misery. And the saddest thing about it is that it would not allow me to leave. Like I wanted to go home. I wanted to be done. I really did. But it just wouldn't let me leave. I lost the say-so in the matter.
You said at one point that your mom, toward the end, who, I mean, I can't, I'm the mother of two sons, both teenagers, and I can't even fathom what that must have been like for your mom. Because I am a mom and I've been a person in the grips of this disease and am now a person in recovery. And I can see this from both sides. But your mother actually said she went to a priest and said, I pray to God to cure him, kill him, or kill me, because I can't take it anymore. I mean, the anguish in that. Why was it that, because it's clear from everything you've said and written how much you love your mom. You've said she's your hero, the most important person in your life. Why would this important person in your life, why was she unable to reach you? And I ask because so many in our audience, are families with kids who are struggling with this.
What I know now is not what I knew then, right? Prior to where I'm at now, I would enter into these programs and I would attempt to get sober and I would save my face, right? Everything was external. I was always trying to fill this internal void with the external solution, right? And then finally what happened is the pain became great enough that I entered into my 13th program and I solely focused on saving my ass. And in saving my ass, somewhere along the line, my ass and my face correlated. And how I got to where I'm at now is I finally have done the internal work that was required in order to achieve the external results that I've always desired, right? And it's very, very simple. It's clearly apparent for me to see that having remained sober long enough now and doing this internal work that I just alluded to, that it's simple for me to look back and recognize the synchronicity in life's events that have led me to the here and now, that prove to me that God has done and has been doing for me so much longer and more than I could ever do for myself. Prior to sobriety, again, underestimating and undermining the opponent that I was up against foolishly, when I was caught up in the throes of it, if you told me you love me, I equate it to $10. If you told me you love me, I got you. And I don't want it to be that way, but the disease from which I possess, it makes it that way. You know, it tells me when to go, who to talk to, where, you know, it dictates, you know, my life is kind of consumed by the getting and using and finding ways and means to get more. And if you're part of that equation, great, we'll work well together. If you stand in between me and it, you have to go. And it's not personal, it's just business. I don't want to do it, but I don't have the privilege to not do it. Truly
Right,
a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, and I've heard from so many families of people who have struggled with addiction, you know, how much they've said they personalize it. It's a family disease, first of all, because it really
Oh,
is.
absolutely.
It impacts the
100%.
entire family. And parents or siblings or spouses or kids are like, well, why couldn't you stop? Don't you love me enough to stop? And
Yeah.
they're not getting it. It doesn't have anything to do with how much I love you. It's a disease that has taken over.
And nor will they ever get it. Nor will they. And I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy.
Yeah.
You know, I really wouldn't. But again, it's a disease. It's left untreated, a fatal disease, right? That's factual evidence. If it's left untreated, we die untreated. Untreated alcoholism, untreated addiction equals death. But to make it even more complex, it's the only fatal disease from which I possess that lies to me on a daily basis in my own voice, telling me I don't possess this disease, that I've gladly accepted the fact that I'm Brandon. I'm an alcoholic. I say it like, hi, how are you? Like, you diagnose me with HIV, I'm rushing to the hospital to get medication. I don't want to die. Fatal disease. Diagnose me with cancer, I'm rushing to the hospital to get chemo. I don't want to die. Fatal disease. Diagnose me as an addict or an alcoholic, I need a glass of wine or a bag of heroin to figure out what the hell's wrong with you for diagnosing me with that disease. It's just as fatal as the first two diseases, literally.
Yeah.
Not even exaggerating here.
There's a great example of the insanity of this disease in another part of your story. You actually at one point wrote a book about your recovery. And
no, not about my recovery.
What was it about?
My life. It's just an autobiography.
Just an autobiography
of my life. Yeah,
so you didn't talk about it? Okay, good. Because I thought
I wrote the book while high.
What was the name of the book?
Dream Seller.
Dream Seller. And then you are at a book signing in Times Square. Mm-hmm. You steal your own books and sell them for money for drugs.
Yeah. And the thing is I couldn't understand how I had gotten there. I couldn't understand how I had gotten there.
Do I ask what the book publisher did?
Oh, well, I had a 3-book deal at that point in time. And immediately upon me stealing my own addiction memoirs from my own book release in Times Square, New York City, I run back to Penn Station. I jump on the first train from Penn Station back to Baltimore with 4 boxes of books. I stole 2, my buddy grabbed 2. And we sell the 4 boxes to 2 different stores to secure enough money to go get high. And we do. And you'll be shocked. I hope you're sitting down for this, but needless to say, the publisher ripped up the contract for the 3-book deal, completely washed his hands of me.
Right. But what you just said, you're stealing your own addiction memoir.
Yeah.
And selling it for drugs to feed your addiction.
Yeah, literally.
That's insanity.
Yeah. And you know, my mother showed up. My brother, I have a brother who's an attorney in the White House. He showed up. My literary agent, my manager, the publishers, people from the publishing company, you know, and it was a big deal.
Did you ever struggle with the regret, the reckoning of what you lost because of your disease?
In the beginning absolutely. But again, I'm married to my narrative. It worked for me, and this is my story. I acquired a sponsor in a 12-step program, a fellowship, and they walked me through and allowed me to experience the 12 steps, and the 12 steps go in order from 1 to 12. So there were times where I wanted to I'm on my fourth step and I'm making this list, and I wanted to jump to my ninth to call these people, which is making my wrongs right and apologize and say I'm sorry. And my sponsor would say they're written in an order for a reason. So
Mm-hmm.
I followed his timeline the same way he did it, and it worked for him. And it was tough at times, but I stayed par of the course. And now what I can honestly say is there's one thing that I regret that I've done in my life. Two things. I regret the pain that I've caused my loved ones and the sleepless night that my addiction brought them. Those
Yeah.
are the only two things. Besides that, I would not change anything. I would not
Really?
take anything back. Nope.
You
No way.
wouldn't change those dark days at the end when you were
Nope.
wandering the streets without any clothes or a place to stay? You wouldn't change any of that
Absolutely not.
because it got you
No
to where
way.
you are.
At 1,000,000%. Uh, again, my disease is centered in my perception. And they taught me in treatment, if I change my perspective, I can change my world. And that's happened as a direct result of the 12 steps, which led me to the spiritual experience, the psychic change. For me to see all of those situations as being divinely inconvenienced.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm the kind of guy that I'm big on having repercussions from actions. I'm the kind of alcoholic. I don't change when things are unmanageable. I change when things are unbearable. Like that's my deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that, again, that's the complexity of alcoholism, right? My story's not yours, and your end or your bottom wasn't mine. And you can't predict it. It's not a black and white, it's just, yeah.
And finally, what would you say to the parents in our audience, especially keeping in mind your only regret in all of this is the pain you
Yeah.
caused your mom, the fact that you say that your mother stood by you and really never gave up on you?
She, when I say she never gave up on me, she did not love me to death. That she did not do, right? And I mean that. She did not love me to death. What she did was she created boundaries. She created healthy boundaries and set guidelines to our relationships. Like when I came home at 19 and tried to put my key in the lock, she had changed the locks, and she
Mm-hmm.
stood on the other side of the door crying uncontrollably and said, Brandon, I will no longer allow you to live here and kill yourself on a daily basis. And at the time, I thought, how dare this woman do this to me? Worst mother of the world. But no, in hindsight, retrospect, looking back, that was probably the best thing she had ever done for me. She's done tons of million things, but
Mm-hmm.
that was the beginning of the best that she did for me. And then, she continued to do that. And it was like, don't call me unless you want to go to treatment. Don't call me to say no, we have nothing to talk about, and so she loved me from that perspective. But it was
Mm-hmm.
never like, hey, let me stay at your house and sleep in your bed and get a shower in your shower and eat your food, And again, that's why I'm a firm believer of having repercussions from actions. So ultimately, it's really tough for me to kind of give a generalized statement to the masses, because God knows I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, and it's just terrible. But what I would suggest is first and foremost to go to Al-Anon. Al-Anon is another 12-step program for the very unfortunate loved ones of an addict or an alcoholic, because they really get the brunt of our addiction, except they don't even have the privilege of feeling the effects of it. Like they just get the worst
Or
part of the whole.
forgetting it later, or yeah,
Yeah, like
it's all very
they
graphically present
I
for
hear
them.
I hear people in meetings say, I worked real hard for my seat. I worked real hard for my seat in this 12-step meeting. And my thought is, and I don't say this out loud, but I'm saying it now, is no, I did not work hard for my seat. You know who worked really hard for my seat? My mother, my employers, anyone that crossed my path worked hard for my seat. If justice was due, I'd be dead years ago. Hence me
Yeah.
being on borrowed time. But I would really start by going to Al-Anon, creating boundaries, just not being ignorant to the facts, the change in behaviors, because unfortunately, most casualties, meaning overdoses, take place in a family's home.
Yeah. You are sober 5 years now?
6.
6?
6.
Congratulations.
Yeah, man. I'm grateful, man.
One day at a time.
That's it. People ask often, how are you? My stock answer is way better than I deserve.
Hmm. Brandon Novak, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for paying it forward, not just through your sober living facility, but by speaking out as honestly and openly as you do, and setting an example that there is life after sobriety. You can still be cool and funny, and life can be great and gritty, and you don't have to have a needle in your arm or a drink in your hand to make it so.
Yeah, I always say sobriety has given me everything that drugs and alcohol ever promised me. Everything in my life is a billion times better. Even my skateboarding today at 42 years old, I have a video part that I'm about to release where I flew to Barcelona and I made an amazing video part that still stands the test of time with like these young guys. I'm traveling the world doing these amazing things, and people might even look at that and be like, there's no way this guy's sober doing all this extreme. My life is just, if I could give the people a piece of what I had, they'd be like, why did I stay stuck on stupid so long for? I get it though. I've done it. And that's
Yeah.
what makes me good at what I do, because I'm really good at playing devil's advocate. It makes sense for me to understand why a person would continue to drink or drug as opposed to accept
Sure,
a
you've
helping
walked the
hand.
walk. You learned the lesson the hard way. Thank
Yeah,
you
I
so
love
much.
it though, man. Thank you for talking. These talks
Yeah.
get me high. I love it, man.
Yeah, no, this was great. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you so much for listening today to Heart of the Matter. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website at drugfree.org/podcast. And as a reminder, if you need help with a loved one who is struggling with substance use, you can text 55753 or visit drugfree.org. We'll talk to you soon.